When... Hello. That's a good question. I sure hope they do. But we do know that if they don't, they will consent to my Zelda download, which I will start when stream ends. So, you know, it's not all bad. Come on. Okay. Yeah, the Zelda... The new Zelda is coming out. Like, I'm pretty sure pre-downloads are available now. Blobber's literally streaming Zelda. Yes, Orlov, there's a new Zelda. Anyway, that's enough about Zelda. We're here to read. So we're gonna start here, like this section right before where we left off. So, brief story recap. Children that turn into trees. Witch lady who has turned a child into a tree right in front of another child's eyes. And yeah, now we're going on a witch hunt. A fell wind whispered through the leaves overhead as Ogier emerged from the tunnel carrying a burning torch. He moved slowly out of the gully, listening hard for any hint of singing as he waved the burning bundle of sticks to and fro. Behind him, the others emerged from the warren, armed with sticks and ropes and other makeshift weapons. They were 9 in all, none wishing to be left alone lest the green lady find them in the tunnels. Once all were assembled, Ogier began to march, the others following behind him. The crackle of the torch and the crunch of leaves and whispers of the others were the only sounds he could hear. Ahead, the harsh torchlight flickered off the faces of those who had gone before, the shadows warping their features into monstrous masks. The night wore on around them as they scaled the gray mountains and descended into the long valley on the other side. For half the nighttime, fervor alone kept them moving, the desire to live and find the one who had so wronged them. At long last, the curse was not some immutable fact about themselves, but had a cause, a figure who had placed it upon them and might well hold the secrets of lifting the death sentence upon them. Despite all of their preparations, there was a great gasp of shock which echoed through their ranks when they crested a small hillock and came within sight of the green woman. Her body glistened wetly. Her body glistened wetly in the light as she turned to them, a single note of sweet music rising from her lips as her fingers trailed over the bark face of a young man taken years before by the curse. And then the children let out a scream and charged like an army from one of their old storybooks. A genuine look of shock came to the green woman's face as her lips closed. And then she turned and ran from them, loping up the next slope like a deer and vanishing from sight. "Get her!" Ogier cried as they charged up after her. Yet, upon reaching the top of the hill, there was no sign of her. The children hurriedly spread out in 2s and 3s, screaming and crying to drown out any foul music. Yet there was no sign of her, her footsteps leading to a faceless pine tree and vanishing as though she had stepped inside the trunk. For what seemed an eternity, the children hunted her, never venturing far from one another, lest they be isolated and destroyed. As time wore on, their voices began to grow thin and give out, the torches burned down, and the energy of the chase ebbed away. As that happened, all returned to Ogier, who was still hunting her. Perhaps he was most driven of all. The memories of Sedig fresh and raw in his mind, for he pushed on long after the others began to flag and slow. Yet the truth began to gnaw at him as well, until their hunt reached a cliff overlooking a deeper canyon below. It was a wonderful spot to watch the moon rise, and likely the sun as well, but it also marked a boundary to their forest world. And as Auge sat down on the soil, looking out over the dark expanse below and the shadowy rock face on the other side, it marked the fizzling of his enthusiasm. "This is pointless, isn't it?" Auge asked. "Perhaps marching out like this is," Lurk said, sitting down beside him. She held her legs to her chest and set her chin on her knees, frowning as she looked into the far distance. "We made so much noise marching around, she would have known we were coming for miles." "Or anyone else haunting these woods," Auge said, reaching out and grasping her hand as he watched the first glow of the moon rising in the distance. "We need to think of a different plan, a better one. One not born of heated desperation," Lurk said, twining their fingers as she leaned against him. There was a stirring in Auge then, an ache and longing for Lurk which had been blooming for some time. Yet he had no idea what to say or how to act upon this feeling. And so he sat there, in their favorite place, one they had visited since they were small, watching the moon rise as the other children gathered around them and settled down as well. Soon the torches burned out or were extinguished, a whipping wind rising over them from the valley below. It was while looking over this valley that Fela spoke up, projecting her voice over the wind. Okay, I need to look at my notes. Fela. Okay. Cloth weaver, digger. I don't know anything else beyond that. What if we lure the green woman to us and trap her in a big hole? It would take many nights to dig such a hole, Auge said quietly. And it would be visible during the day while we're sleeping. Not if we dig it out from below, Fela said insistently. We tunnel in underneath and dig it out deep enough and then remove the top. That might work, Lurk said, clasping her hands. It might if we're able to lure the Green Lady to us, Auge said quietly. For all we know, she'll stay at a distance and... Let's not make up problems we don't know about, Wilnick said quietly. She's out there, probably hunting us. We'll take advantage of that. Auge nodded, though he felt a deep doubt that their plan would work. Still, doing something is preferable to nothing. Auge released Lurk's hand and rose to his feet, putting his longing for love... I'm sorry, that's just... It's very funny. Putting his longing for love out of mind as he turned to the others, the moon shining behind him. We return to the Warrens now, find a good place to lay our trap, and then we begin to dig in shifts. Some of us will have to stay up during the day, won't we? Wilnick asked, running a hand nervously through his green-tinged hair. We'll have the youngsters dig during the day, Lurk said confidently. That way no one will feel the allure and no one will be alone. Good thinking, Auge said, nodding. With everything set, the children rose as one from the overlook, marching back the way they had come through the woods. With their torches out, they moved by the gentle silver light of the moon and stars above. Before long, they arrived back at the little gully where the Green Lady had been seen, the haunted trees rising overhead. Auge slowed briefly, noticing that there were several oversized acorns in the branches of the cursed trees. A vague memory came to him then, a distant knowledge that this was a rare thing to behold. Yet he shook his head and averted his gaze without slowing down, for he had a mission to perform and would not let unusual seeds distract him from capturing their hated foe. Lurk yawned in exhaustion as she took a brief break from their feverish work, leaning on the handle of her shovel. Ahead of her, through a short tunnel, was the hole they were digging, though at the moment it looked like any other large room they had built over the years. Phala was leading the design, using her knowledge of digging to guide the others. The roof and walls had been shored up by timbers, barely 2 inches of dirt protecting them from the glare of the deadly sun overhead. Orlov, have you seen the Ice Age movies? I mean, if there aren't oak trees, there's not going to be acorns. Like, I completely understand Orlov here. But yeah, if you remember the thing that the little rat guy is always trying to eat, that's an acorn. Anyway, below a little mound of dirt was slowly being reduced in size to bring the final floor level all around. In the end, the hole would be 10 paces across and as many deep. The biggest sticking point was whether or not to line the hole with stones. Phala seems to think that the Green Lady will likely escape into the dirt if we don't, while Augier says that that will take too long. Lurk reflected, frowning as she tried to take a side. But it seems that they are both likely right in their way. With a sigh, Lurk took her shovel once more to join the others. The warm yellow light of the oil lamp fell over them as she resumed her work, cutting into the soil with her wooden shovel blade, and wrenching free another slab of soil. This she dropped into a bucket, which Warnus scooped off and ran off with to dispose of. It was terribly inefficient in truth, for they had not enough buckets and few places to put the dirt during the day. And so, despite the idea of working in shifts, the children were all working more or less round the clock, making more buckets for hauling dirt, finding places to put it, and repairing the shovels and picks as they became damaged during the work. Only Taggett was at all happy, for there was now clay in abundance for him to mold and shape as he saw fit. Okay, wait, Barb, the reason I called Scrat a rat thing is because I forgot the word squirrel, and rat is in his name. Plus, he has rat energy, you know this. He also has squirrel energy, which is the point, but he has rat energy. That's what matters. Time ticked by slowly as Lurk and Phala slowly reduced that mound of soil in the middle of the chamber, hoping that it would become the trap they all hoped it would be. Indeed, there were times when it seemed that they were making no progress, for the ground seemed to have an endless supply of dirt, and their ability to dispose of it was limited at best. At long last, her strength gave out, just as Algae arrived to relieve her. "Perfect timing," Lurk said, shooting the boy a smile. "I'm all tuckered out." "Me too," he sighed, though he did perk up on looking into the room, adding in a more hopeful tone, "I should sleep more. That seems like the only time progress is made." Okay, the up upon is a very interesting connection of words. Like, it's not uncommon, it's not wrong, but just like, I read the first up and then my mind just like elided the second up. That's great. Okay. "I know that feeling," Lurk laughed, clapping the boy on the shoulder as she handed him the shovel and walked off down the tunnel. As the darkness closed around her, she glanced back at him one last time, whispering, "I know that feeling all too well." And then she was off, making her way back towards the main chambers. And yet she veered off at the intersection, going not to the bedchambers or the shrine, but to the grotto. Here the soil-scented air of the dirt tunnel gave way to the mineral dampness of a cavern, the soft ground giving way to hard stone under her feet. A gentle glow greeted her as she entered the bathing chamber, an oil lamp already glowing on the shore. There before her was a pool of water, 20 paces across and as many deep in places, stalactites hanging from the domed roof. Where the water came from and where it went were something of a mystery, Though Alfun the Traveler had told of deep well springs and porous stones, none of which made much sense to Lurk. What did make sense to her was the presence of Auge, trying to wash away his fear and shame since he was unable to sleep. That longing so deep it became a burning ache came to her again as she stood there, watching him wash in waist-deep water. After a moment, she shed her own dress and stepped in behind him, the cool water refreshing on her skin. "How's the digging going?" Auge asked without turning around. "Is that all you have to say?" Lurk asked, stepping right up to him and sliding her arms around his middle. She buried her face in his shoulder, adding in a whisper, "To me, the woman you love?" Auge turned around then, the light shining on his eyes and mottled skin as he draped his arms over her and pulled her close. In a hushed voice, he asked, How can you doubt that I love you, Lurk?" "Well, it seems like there's something missing, doesn't it?" she asked, pressing her body close to his. "Like those stories Alfun left us, love is meant to bring people together." "We seem together right now," Auge replied, yet there was a twinge of pain in his face. He looked away, muttering, "But you are right. I can't ever make the ache go away." Then he lifted her up in his arms, kissing her on the lips, kissing her on the neck, kissing her between her breasts. Each one sent a shiver of pleasure through Lurk, yet left her wishing for more. She kissed him back, fluffing his hair with her hands. For a long moment, they held one another together in the cool water. The ache began to abate, like a wound in the first throes of healing. Yet, as Lurk looked into his eyes, they both knew that something was missing from their lives and their love. Music, you are not tonally appropriate for this scene. I'm sorry. Memories of those storybooks written from the words of their long-deceased rescuer danced through her mind, though none of them seemed to help. After a few long moments, the two released one another, their longing turned to frustration. With a grunt, Auge turned from her and stared at the wall, his voice drained and on edge as he asked, "Is the dig going well?" "Yeah, I'll bet he's on edge." Okay. "You were there only a few hours ago," Lurk muttered, turning her back on him in turn. It is continuing on as it did then. That means we'll have a proper trap by tonight. If we forego lining the pit with stones." "Don't tell me you've been listening to Fela." Auge sighed. "We don't have time." "And if we waste our one and only chance of trapping the Green Lady?" Lurk asked. "She won't fall into a pit again." "If we take the time to line that whole pit with stones," Auge said quietly, "we'll all starve before we can catch her. There are too few of us." "Is it? Wait, what? It's green. It's definitely green." Okay. Okay, well, let's hope it stays okay. "We'll all starve before we can catch her. There are too few of us. And fewer still if we wait too long." "Exactly." Auge began sloshing to the shore, muttering, "I need to try and get some sleep. The hole will be ready before long." Lurk nodded, though she suspected that Auge did not see her. After a moment, she looked at him, watching as he dried himself off with a rag. Several things she ought to say came to mind, but Lurk voiced none of them. Instead, she flashed Augie a smile as he stole a glance over his shoulder at her, and remained still as he stepped back down the tunnel towards the beds. Once he was gone, Lurk crouched down, tracing a finger through the surface of the water, the ache from earlier coming back in full force as she knew in her bones that there was something missing in their lives. Is it sex? Are they missing sex? This is just like 1984. The moon was bright overhead as Augie paced around the hole, unable to think of anything except how everything would go horribly wrong. He foresaw the leaves which they had spread over the top. Being seen through in an instant and the green woman ignoring them. He saw them having made the lattice underneath too strong, letting her walk across without ever knowing the hole was there. He foresaw the woman having heard their digging and therefore never appearing at all. Time seemed to drag on and on as Augie waited, the silver moonlight streaming through the branches into the forest around him. He glanced up at the gray mountains, fixing in his mind how stones looked from this place. Then there was a rustling, Augie freezing in place. All at once, his thoughts turned into being caught by the Green Lady alone. And then the bushes on the hillock behind him parted, Lurk coming into view. "Everything's ready." "Good," Augie said, nodding, feeling his heart tapping against his chest. "Now we need to..." "I'll do it," Lurk said confidently. "I can keep my head while she's singing." "No, I will be the bait," Augie said firmly. "But Augie..." "No buts," Augie said, shaking his head. "I'm putting my foot down." There was a moment's pause, Lurk averting her gaze. Beside her, Fela and Yessie appeared in the bushes, likely having been there the whole time, in case anyone went off on their own. After a moment, young Yessie spoke, saying, "Here. Please, it should be one of us youngsters." "Fela isn't that young anymore," Lurk said. "And I'm elder. I get to make this decision." "Says who?" "Says me," Augie said, marching up to her and looking down. "I'm bait for you." I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm gonna have some water. Calm down. Okay, I'm ready. I'm not ready. I keep trying to say it, and I see the words and start laughing. Okay. I'm bait for your hole. After she falls in, you all have the dangerous task while I get to sit back and relax up here. Okay, we did it. We can forget that ever happens. Silence fell, Lurk biting her lip as though she had more to say. Then she shook her head and closed the distance between them, looping her arms around Augie. I'm bait for you. sorry. I'm not trying to be mean. It's very much not intentional. It's just so funny. Especially after we just established that the thing that's missing from them is sex. Like, it's so Okay. Please be safe. I will be, Oge promised, returning her embrace and holding her close. There was a brief flare of longing, a burning ache. And then it was gone, replaced by a cold determination. Oge took the little sharpened stick on a string to prod himself with, in case the song began to enrapture him. And then he was off, marching alone away from the hole in a straight line. The forest seemed to close in around him, the eyes of those who had suffered the curse before him staring from every side. Oge strained to listen for any sign of the Green Lady's voice, or even her footfalls, something which would guide him. Yet the forest was quiet, a hooting owl, all which broke that expectant stillness. In the absence of anything real, Oge's mind conjured her at every turn, the bushes and shadows and even the ancestor trees becoming her when he did not see them straight on. Always she would vanish when he looked closer, reinforcing that lingering doubt. This is pointless, just like that night we all charged at her as a group. It was while traversing a gully between two hillocks that the night's stillness was broken by a real rustling in the undergrowth. Oge froze, listening with every part of his being. For a few moments, he heard only the thump of his heart and gasping breath, both deafeningly loud. And then she appeared, her flesh green and eye dark, each step sounding like falling leaves. The Green Lady stepped into the clearing towards him. There was a concerned expression on her face, almost kindly. Yet her eyes were dark pits, and memories of Sedig's fate was clear in Oge's mind. And so he turned and began to run. A word froze him, a sound like wind through branches, the Green Lady reaching out towards him. She spoke again, a sweet and alluring sound. Oge felt his head swimming like that night, and so he bit his tongue and stabbed himself with the stick, resuming his flight. For a time he was caught there, between the fear of being drawn to her and the fear of losing her. Again and again he glanced over his shoulder and slowed, seeing no sign of the Green Woman, only to run faster when she loomed once more in the distance. The distance back home seemed thrice as long to Oge as that going out, the woods stretching on and on. More than once he staggered between the trees as his strength flagged, threatening to spill him to the ground and leave him at the Green Woman's mercy. So tired and drained and stressed was Oge that he very nearly fell into their own trap. Only that long memorization of the Grey Mountains let him stop just in time. For a long moment he stood, panting, his blood rushing through his veins. Without turning around, he hurried around the hole, stopping on the far side. The Green Lady was yet to appear. Heartened, Oge leaned against a faceless, normal tree, as though he had reached the end of his strength. And that's not too far wrong, Oge thought, panting uncontrollably as sweet sweat rolled across his skin. Fear and triumph roiled inside Oge when the Green Lady appeared, her eyes fixed upon him. She spoke once more in that strange tongue of hers, the words musical, lyrical. Oge pressed the sharpened stick into his palm, and waited as she strode slowly onto the leaf mat covering the hole. Time seemed to stop, his fear burning hotter with each of her steps, as that old worry that they had made the trap lid too strong roared inside of him. The lady was halfway across, her hand lifted towards him, when there was a great, earth-shattering crash, punctuated by her heart-stilling cry. The false ground collapsed beneath the Green Lady, sending her plunging into the pit below. Her cry cut out suddenly, silence closing over the clearing. Auge stared at the little hole she had made in their covering, elated that their plan had worked, yet concerned that he could not look in to see how she was. "Did we kill her?" Auge whispered to himself as he stood there against the tree, listening to the night. When the sound of whispers below reached him through the hole, he marched as near as he dared. Through the hole he marched as near as he dared, shouting down, "Did we catch her?" "She's down there, down here," Fela said uncertainly, "but she's just laying there." "Did we kill her?" No, it was just the sentence was a bit long and I forgot what happened at the start of the sentence. It's nothing wrong with that. "Did we kill her?" Auge asked, the words feeling strange this time. "I'm not sure." "I'm coming down there," Auge said, turning away. "Keep her from escaping." And then he was off running, through the forest to the little gully and then into the warren once more. The common room was lit up from the fires, Iben and Algae looking at Auge expectantly. He flashed them a smile, saying, "We caught her." Mission accomplished, George Bush. American flag in the background on an aircraft carrier. The two nodded, Algae looking relieved. Iben, on the other hand, looked befuddled, though he did not say anything as Auge ran by. Soon Auge had made his way through the winding tunnels to the entrance to the pit. Here he found Lurk and Fela and Taggett, all gathered around their little window into the trap, for they had blocked up the doorway into the pit, leaving only a small viewing window narrower than a hand width and about thrice as wide. Yeah, I'll pause right when I get to Twilight. All of them glanced at Auge, looking anxious. He gulped in a breath and asked, "Well, what is the Green Lady doing?" "Nothing," Lurk replied, moving aside. Auge hurried to her place and peered inside. There, amongst the fallen leaves and collapsed posts, was the Green Lady, laying as though in a trance on the floor. She made no move to rise, indeed seemed completely insensate. A prickle of unease came over Auge as he whispered once more, "Did we kill her?" "So what if we did?" Taggett asked savagely. "She killed Sedig and would have done the rest of us if we hadn't stopped her." "Still, we might have learned from her," Lurk said, leaning against the wall. "This is the first time we've seen any sign of where our curse comes from." "And if we did kill her, it didn't break the curse," Auge muttered, rubbing the brown blotches on his skin. "Damn, I wish we'd have gotten a chance to talk with her." "She'd have tricked us somehow," Fela said quietly. "That's what witches do." "Still," Lurk sighed, shaking her head. "Do we watch her like hawks and see if she comes back around, or go in there and burn what's left of her?" "Let's keep vigil," Auge said. "We know so little about her." "And when the sun rises?" Lurk asked. "Someone needs to cover that hole she made," Auge replied. "That should keep out the worst of the light." "And the light that does leak in?" Fela asked. There was a long pause, Auge flexing his hands. Then he admitted defeat, turning to them to say, "All right, we need to bring her into a place where we can hold her." "Wait, I know," Fela said, clapping her hands together. "We seal her into this tunnel here. I'll enter the pit with a rope and we'll move her without touching her. Then we seal up the way back. That way her only escape route is into a big hole." "For all we know, she's as weak to sunlight as we are," Taggett said, a note of hope in her voice. "After all, we've only ever seen her in the dark." "That's because we can only walk the world in the night," Auge thought, yet he kept that to himself. Instead he nodded, mentally putting together all which needed doing as they prepared to take their first ever prisoner. Okay, pause. I'm going to drink some water and refill my water bottle. You can listen to Luminaria music. I mean, okay. You know I'm a fan of Trans Anyone headcanon. So sure. Well, also, it would be very funny if the thing that was missing from their relationship is that neither of them know what a penis is. That would be great. That would be really funny. So yeah, how's chat doing? Besides waiting to play New Zelda. Ooh. Oh, nice. One of my IRLs just booted up Breath of the Wild, and at like 3.5 hours ago, and she's at Calamity Ganon. She's gonna do it. She's gonna win. Oh wait, no, she forgot the tech. No. No. Oh well. Death's Head is back. We gotta keep reading. Twilight. The oil lamp burned low behind Lurk as she struggled to stay awake, her eyes closing on their own more often than not. Before her, in the little holding room, lay the Green Lady, still as before, seemingly dead. It had been both far easier and more harrowing to move her than anticipated. For while she never came awake, Fela had accidentally touched her skin, screaming as her entire hand turned brown like bark and grew difficult to move. With some effort, Fela had regained the use of her fingers, but the stark lesson had filled them all with the fear of this creature. Even in death, this Green Lady holds a terrible power over us all. The notion of burning her body had been floated, though Age had insisted that they refrain for at least a day, lest they lose their one chance to unravel the curse upon them all. And so Lurk found herself in the tunnel, watching the insensate body of the Green Lady as she struggled not to fall asleep. Behind her, Ivan and Warnus had been tasked with staying up along with her, lest one of them be caught alone with the Green Lady's foul powers. In truth, Warnus had already nodded off, and Lurk herself was not far off, her fear of the woman fading in the face of her apparent death. Instead, there was something beautiful, almost familiar about the woman. With a start, Lurk realized that she had been nodding off. She rose and began to pace, seeing that both Ivan and Warnus were already asleep. After waking herself up with a bit of exercise, she knelt down and shook both of them awake. Ivan opened his eyes at once, while Warnus required a little more prodding and cajoling before she at last rose and resumed her vigil. After a glance through the window, she said in an irritable tone, "Looks like the lady is still dead. Shall we burn the body and get it over with?" "Of course not. We're meant to watch her in case what?" Warnus demanded. She wakes up after we've nodded off? I'd rather not turn into a tree if that's all right with you. That's all well and good, but we can't do that. Why not? Because Augie told us? Lurk blinked, realizing that that was exactly the reason. She yawned, her eyes watering, before saying, "And I agree with him. This could be our chance to break the curse. Or it could be our doom. You saw what happened when Phala brushed against that thing." Warness leveled her finger at the window. "We burn her now and say that she burst into flames on her own. They'd be suspicious of us if we did that. Let them suspect us. Better that than she escapes while we're enthralled." Lurk swallowed, twin desires fighting in her middle. And then Ivan spoke up, his voice clear and firm. "No, it's wrong." "And who are you to say that?" "He's right," Lurk said then, casting her lot as she turned a wary eye on Warness. "We'd be caught and lose this chance and maybe even be thrown out. But... Warness stammered, looking back and forth between them. Yet it was no use now. Defeated, she sat back down, a forlorn expression coming to her face as she stared at the ground. "I'm scared, Lurk. This woman, she might be the end of all of us. And she might be the key to lifting the curse," Lurk said insistently. "We won't know which is which until it happens. We don't know whether we'll die until we die." "Okay, that doesn't fill me with confidence, Lurk." Warness nodded. She sobbed once, clutching her hands to her chest, and then she drifted off to sleep. Lurk let out another deep yawn, drained herself, as she looked through the window at the still figure of the Green Lady. After that burst of energy, she was fading again. Each time her eyes closed, it was harder to open them, her mind beginning to swim. Yeah, no, it works. I'm just saying, like, from my outside perspective, like, I found a flaw in your quote unquote plan, Lurk. I'm very smart. There was a shiver, and then she opened her eyes to find the Green Lady awake and looking at her. Lurk tried to speak, tried to cry out or move, but she was rooted in place as the Green Lady rose in her little cell, looking out at her with sad eyes. Somewhere Lurk knew that she was dreaming, but it was too real for the thought to offer any comfort. Okay, Green Lady voice. "My child," the Green Lady said, her voice like wind rustling through the leaves and the sweetness of spring. "Why do you and your siblings do this? Does your body not ache to take root? Have you no love you wish to pursue? What has happened to all of you?" Lurk rocked back and forth, in a dream and outside of her dream, her lips unable to move, her eyes unable to close. And so she could only watch as the Green Lady reached out towards her and took her hand, whispering, "There is nothing to fear." A warm shiver rolled through Lurk's hand as her flesh turned brown and fixed in place for all time. The world trembled around the edges, the dark tunnel giving way to a bright forest clearing filled with birdsong and the gentle wash of water. The Green Woman embraced her then, Lurk feeling her body take root as the warm light flowed over her like a soothing balm. "Is this not bliss?" And then in a flash there was darkness everywhere. Lurk felt herself fall over backward as her lips at last let out a cry. She frantically waved her hands through the air, screaming in terror as she looked into the darkness before her. True terror took hold, as Lurk imagined that this was it. She had become a tree at last. All of her movements were in her mind while an eternity of darkness had come to her now sightless eyes. She began to cry, sobbing openly as the darkness pressed home. "Lurk," came the bewildered voice of Fela. "Calm down." A light sparked into life, revealing the tunnel around her. Fela and Wilnek stood over her, the latter holding a lamp in his hands while the former had brought a long pole with her. For a long moment, they all stared at one another. Slowly, Lurk realized that she had been having a nightmare. A glance through the window revealing that the green lady was laying there, still. Lurk let out a sigh, feeling a prickle of embarrassment as she said, "Forgive me, I had a nightmare." "So did I," Fela said, rubbing her completely brown hand. "Well, it's our turn to take watch," Wilnek said, forcing a smile. "Hopefully we won't fall asleep." "Hopefully," Lurk said, forcing a laugh as she rose. Then she paused, looking once more through the window. The green lady was still as death. Yet Lurk was certain that she had been laying the other direction before. With a shake of her head, she said, "Please be more careful than I was." "We will be." Oh no, Velvet fell. Velvet. "We will be," Fela said, nodding. "Now go get some proper rest." Fela and... who are you? Who's the other one? Warness. My Fela and my Warness are like basically the same, but whatever. With that, Lurk roused Warness. Though she found that Ivan was still awake. Together, the trio set off for the bedchambers, Lurk feeling a cool relief with each step they put between herself and the Green Lady. As they walked down the tunnel, the light fading around them, she glanced at Ivan and asked, Say, were you awake the whole time? Brelix, hello, how was American football?" "I was," he replied, his face hidden in the shadows swallowing them all. "Did you see any movement?" Lurk asked. "In the Green Woman, I mean." "None at all," Ivan replied. "Why? Did you notice anything?" "No, nothing," Lurk said, pushing away her errant thought as they turned into the utterly black warren of tunnels to seek their beds. Okay, plot summary. There are kids. They kind of live together. They turn into trees. They saw a lady who like very quickly turned one of them into trees. It's normally a slow process. So they hatched a plan, they trapped her, and now they are very bad at keeping watch over her corpse, ? Yeah, there we go. I think that's a decent summary. Also, they're very bad at being horny with each other. Just not good. They need help. Yeah, exactly. You can't turn your back on the body. Tension lingered in Augay as he and Yessie and Ivan walked through the forest in search of food. Their usual sources of acorns had been thin at best, while the berry bushes were well picked over by birds. Even mushrooms were in short supply, though Augay reflected that Taggart would likely know better how to find a bounty of them, even now. But he's stuck guarding the Green Lady's body, Augay reflected, though perhaps he shouldn't be. Indeed, after a long day's nap, Augay had awoken to find that there had been no sign of life from the creature's corpse. He was increasingly convinced that they had killed her, which brought him only a vague sense of loss. For there's no telling if there are more of them lurking out there, nor did we learn anything useful from her. Augay let out a long sigh as he came to a stop, looking over the grove of cursed trees around him. The others stopped as well, Yessie flopping down on the ground and tracing her finger in the soil. For a long moment, no one spoke, the trio instead looking around at the faces of those who had succumbed before. No acorns to be found here, Age said quietly, glancing up at the 2 large acorns growing high up in one poor woman's branches. None to eat, anyway. Not unless a squirrel brought them here, Yessie said, frowning as she glanced at the others. So why did we stop here? I don't know, Age said, blinking. I'm not particularly tired. Me either, Ivan said. I only felt like stopping here. Yessie rose from the ground, brushing off her long tunic as she said, We should keep moving. I don't like this. But I dreamed of this place, Oye said quietly, closing his eyes. He could see the grove clearly in his mind, having traveled here during his long day's sleep. I dreamed of here. So did I, Ivan said. The Green Lady brought me here to see something. This is a trick, Yessie said, hysteria in his voice. I've decided Yessie is a girl because similar name to a Luminaria character. And I get to do that because we're listening to the Luminaria soundtrack. I dreamed that too. It's her magic. She's bringing us here to... He, him, girl, though. Love that for him. He ran a hand through his hair, whimpering. She's going to make us join this grove. That's your imagination, Oge said, though he did not believe the words even as he spoke. He took a deep breath, then put one foot in front of the next, saying, But we should get moving. We need to find food, and the sharp snap of a branch breaking cut off Age mid-sentence. He watched as though in slow motion as the large acorn from the woman's branches fell. With a thump, it struck the ground, coming to rest directly beside Yessie. For a long moment, there was silence, and then a soft, whimpering cry began to echo from under the acorn's shell. Hands trembling, Age reached down and pressed his fingers tentatively against the smooth surface, feeling it bow beneath them. And then he found a crack and broke it open, revealing inside a squealing baby with milky pale skin veined with brown and green like theirs. The infant quieted for a moment, their eyes locking together. After a brief pause, the crying resumed, the baby rolling over and crawling to the roots of the woman. There, the child crawled up to her breasts, suckling on the sap which rose from her chest. A moment later, a second infant crawled from a small hole in the forest floor, hurrying to the second woman in the grove to have a meal of her sap as well. A deadly silence fell as they watched both infants growing before their eyes. One was already clearly a young girl, while the other was shaping up to be a boy. It seemed clear that in a few days both would be as large as the smallest children who stumbled into the cave. The wind whispered through the trees, Yessie whimpering as she fell back to the ground, grabbing her legs and holding them tight. Ivan, on the other hand, walked up to the two children with a curious expression, looking them over as they grew in size before their eyes. Age, though, was silent and still, feeling as though he had been punched in the head. For the longest time, he refused to understand, refused to acknowledge what he was seeing. Yet soon the young girl slid down her mother's trunk and dropped to the forest floor, her eyes glowing in the starlight as she looked up at him. Then she began to crawl, making a pleasant mewling noise. Age hunched down, numbly holding out his hands as she crawled into his arms and pressed herself against his shoulder. There was a gentle sound like leaves falling, Age turning to find himself face to face with the Green Lady. She was standing at the edge of the grove, a thoughtful look on her face as she watched them. Yessie saw her a moment later, screaming that they ought to have burned the body when they had the chance, as she scrambled to her feet and fled off into the night. At the cry, the girl against Age's shoulder began to weep as well, though he began rocking her in his arms, the motion stilling her as she drifted off to sleep. "You see now what you are," the Green Lady said softly in their language, taking a step closer. "Or perhaps you have a good notion." "We're seeds, aren't we?" Ivan asked. "That is so," the Green Lady said. She walked up to the boy hanging from the tree. He had stopped feeding and was now pressing himself against his mother's trunk, unwilling to let her go. In a healthy dryad forest, there are many free walkers like myself tending the needs of the still ones and looking over the seeds during their 12 seasons waiting to take root. If what you say is true, then where have you been for the last 60 seasons? I was still, and in my own forest, many hundreds of miles from here, the Green Lady said sadly. When we heard of an orphan forest, I was dispatched at once to see what was the matter. And indeed, I found a whole woodland which did not know the words of our true tongue, and hostile, frightened seeds, many of whom had lingered out of the ground long after their proper time to take root. "What if we don't want to take root?" Auge asked savagely, feeling a hopeless, helpless dread settling upon him. "Eternal darkness and stillness sounds like a nightmare." "That's not what taking root is like at all," the Green Lady said in a pained voice. "You must have felt the allure, the peace and warmth of the sunlight, surely you have." "Maybe I have," Auge said. "But that doesn't mean I have to let it control me. I can come out at night and after the age of 12 seasons, all light will push you towards taking root. Even the stars and fire? Even those? Then I'll retreat into the deepest caves," Auge said, hysteria in his voice. "I'll live in total darkness if it means escaping that fate." "You would perish without the light," the Green Lady said, a pained expression on her face. "It is difficult for me to even talk about this. Taking root is always such a joyous occasion. To have a seed so violently afraid, it is not something I ever imagined I would find." "Well, it is who we are," Auge said, feeling a thrill of defiance. "We do not want to turn into trees." "But like how a caterpillar must cocoon itself to become a butterfly, so you must become a tree before emerging as a full dryad as I am." She took a step toward him then, slowly, holding her hinds behind her back. "Please, hear me, young seed." "My name is Auge. Do they not even have names back where you come from?" "Not as such," the Green Lady replied, looking around the grove. "Your rooted elders hold their names as well. This is such a strange place to behold." "You speak as though you've talked to them," Ivan said. "But I have," the Green Lady said, looking at him now. "In rooted form, one's awareness spreads to every corner of the forest and all those inside. It is wonderful." She inhaled then, hanging her head. "And yet, even your elders, bathed in the glory of the sun, thought only of how I could walk and how they might become as I am as quickly as they can." "Were they not right to do so?" Ivan asked. "I cannot say," the Green Lady said miserably. "All I know is that an entire forest has grown here in utter ignorance of our ways, and I know not if the damage can be undone, or if that would even be desirable." "Then where does that leave us?" Auge asked. "It leaves you needing to take root. I know that a horrible death is all that awaits any who refuse too long." She shook her head then, her voice lowering. "I would relate the parable of the delinquent seed who turned into a potato, but all of your stories are different too. Those words would mean nothing to you." Most of our tales come from Alfun the Traveler, Ivan said. Was this all his doing? Perhaps he was responsible for your strange way of speaking and some fears of taking root, but this forest has been growing here for at least 200 years, and those who lived before that human man were as ignorant of our ways as those who came after. Then he found some seeds hiding from the light and thought them cursed human children. Auge said quietly. Is that what happened? Those lonely seeds, the green woman moaned, casting her gaze skyward. Perhaps it was for the best that he came along, else I would have come to find nothing here at all. The forest was failing before he arrived. I can put that much together from all I have seen and heard. And how do we know that everything you've told us is true? Auge asked. Maybe this is a trick. Is that little girl there in your arms anything? Is that little girl in your arms there anything but real? Who can know the mind of a witch? He said, though there was no weight behind his words. Instead, there was a growing hollowness inside Auge that everything he had thought he knew of the world was a lie. He shook his head, rising from the ground and whispering, What do I do with her? Leave her here with her mother. She needs at least a week, perhaps 2, before she will be strong enough to forage on her own. Though you might then bring her to your little sanctuary, instead of leaving her to fend for herself. Auge nodded, carrying her back to her mother's roots and gently laying her on the ground. For a moment he looked down at her, his heart heavy. Then he turned away and looked at the Green Lady. He searched for something to say, but all of his questions had been answered. The Green Lady nodded to him, saying in that ethereal voice, I will return to you when I am able. Now that I have learned your language, it should make things smoother. Please do not despair or grow angry at your fate. And then she was gone, sweeping away through the undergrowth. For a time, Auge stood stock still, watching her go. And then he turned to Ivan, searching the youngster for any sign of help. Yet all they could do was watch as the young boy who had fallen from the tree released his mother's breast and slid down the trunk, curling up amongst her roots, having grown half again as large as when he had emerged from the shell. Come on, Auge said distantly. Let's return to the others. Oughtn't we gather acorns to eat? What's the point? Auge muttered, turning away from the grove and beginning the long march back to their home. Yeah, sap apparently makes superb milk. Drink your local tree today. Wait, no, that's just Canada. The crackling of the fire and Fela's mumbled curses filled the otherwise silent common room. No one else spoke, nor did there seem to be much worth saying. The weight of the Green Lady's words pressed down upon them as though the whole vault of the sky were now resting upon their shoulders. More than anything else, Lurk felt a deep sense of betrayal. I knew all along that I would certainly turn into a tree, but I never knew I was in truth a seed, she thought bitterly, cursing Alfun under her breath. Don't say that, Auge said from across the room, hunched over beside the fires. You're right, Orlov, my bad. Suck your local maple tree. Why shouldn't she? Wilnick snapped. The man lied to our forebears, maybe our own parents, and kept us in the dark for who knows how many seasons. The Green Lady herself told him that she wasn't sure what he did was all bad, Taggart said quickly. We're not like the Dryads from where she comes from. Maybe that's for the best. He was an old man doing the best he could, Auge said, nodding. He didn't understand that the children were seeds, just that they were in trouble and needed help. And his help turned us against our nature, Fela said softly. Then go run out and turn into a tree if you'd like, Algae said fiercely. I'm sure that the Green Lady would be happy to help you take root. Shut up, Fela retorted. She rose then, cringing as she flexed her hand. It keeps going numb and stiff like a branch. She inhaled a shuddering breath, and then she ran across the room to the supplies, seizing an axe from the kindling pile. Okay, there are people here who can clip. Orlov, you do the clip. Death's Head, you do the clip. And then she ran across the room to the supplies, seizing an axe from the kindling pile. She raised it with a choking cry, putting her offending hand against the wall. Lurk was there a moment later, grabbing her arm and keeping her from striking home. The two wrestled, Fela crying out as she tried to throw Lurk off, crying, "Please, please, I have to get rid of this before it spreads." "It'll spread regardless," Taggart shouted, jumping to his feet. "We're seeds, that's the truth." "According to the Green Lady, it is," Wilnick shouted, a savage look on his face. "How do we know she's not lying to us for her own purposes?" "We saw the child come out of a giant acorn," Auge said. "There's still one in the mother's branches. You can go out there and look if you need convincing." "And it explains so much," Taggart muttered. "We're driven out of the light to incubate and then drawn to it when it's our time to take root. It's why the wolves leave us alone. We're plants, not meat worth eating." "I can't take it," Fela sobbed, falling limp in Lurk's hands and leaning her head against her shoulder. "It's my own hand. I can feel it. I'm going to turn." "Maybe that's a good thing," Auge said distantly, his words striking Lurk like thrown stones. "We're seeds meant to take root and grow." "How can you say such an evil thing?" Lurk hissed, holding Fela against her breast as the woman began to weep. She turned to Auge, shooting him a savage glare. "And here I thought Alfun was a cruel man who misled us," Auge said, a hollow laugh escaping his lips as he approached them. "Yet here you are, repeating his old fear that we turn into trees." "You don't know what it's like, Auge," Lurk said. "Poor Fela's had her hand ruined." "I know what sunlight feels like, the intoxicating pleasure of standing in the warmth, and I know that something is missing from our lives." Auge swallowed, putting a tentative hand on her shoulder. "And I think everyone else older than 12 seasons feels that too." Lurk turned away, brushing off his hand, for the truth was that she did feel those things, felt a hole in her life and a longing for the sun. Yet she shied away, flexing her fingers as she said, "But to never move again. One day we'll become full dryads like the Green Lady and walk again. And how long will that be?" Fela quailed, releasing Lurk at last and pressing her face into the soft soil of the wall. "Oh, thank you for the attempt, Orlov. It's okay. Orlov, you're perfect." She turned back after a moment, her face caked with dirt. "How long will we stand there, immobile, helpless?" "I don't know," Auge admitted, "but it won't be forever, and we'll be able to speak with our parents and our friends and all who came before." How? How could we possibly speak when we won't have working mouths?" Lurk asked. "Auge, that doesn't make any sense." "Maybe not, but the Green Lady spoke with them, told me about her frustration talking to them. And haven't you felt the voices on the wind?" Auge asked, his eyes suddenly lighting up. "Maybe they've been trying to talk with us this whole time." "Do you have any idea how mad you sound right now?" Wilnick said, his voice again hysterical. "We freeze in place and then talk with our parents. Or maybe we just die, enter the darkness forever, and fuel that lady's foul magic." Taggart stirred then, his face twisted in anger as he prepared to start their circular argument up once more. and then there was the sound of running feet echoing through the tunnel. All eyes turned to the entryway, watching as Yessie spilled inside. For a moment, it looked like the youngster had turned prematurely brown. Yet Lurk saw at once that she had been blackened by fire, with smoke rising from patches on her body. He looked at them all with anguish. Okay, wait. Gender fluid Yessie. Okay. He looked at them all. Extremely rapid turnover. Gender fluid Yessie. It makes sense. He looked at them all with anguished guilt and shame so deep that it was a wonder he did not break down sobbing right there. Lurk ran to her at once, wrapping her arms around Yessie as she said, "It's all right. You're home now. You can tell us what happened." I didn't intend," Yessie stammered. "Tell us what happened, please," Age said in a kind voice, stepping up beside her and kneeling down. Yet, in truth, he half knew already what she had done. "I tried to burn her," Yessie said quietly. "I tried to start a fire and trick the Green Lady, but it spread, and now—" "Half the forest is aflame," Lurk said, the words echoing through the common room. There was a moment of dead silence. Yessie whimpered, clutching her hands to her sides as everyone else stood stock still. With surprising calm, Lurk rose to her full height and spoke loudly. "Everyone fetch a bucket and follow me, quickly." All eyes turned to her, the others remaining frozen before first Augier, then everyone else scrambled into action. They ran down the tunnel, taking up the buckets which had been so recently filled with dirt. And then they were up and out into the forest at night. The smell of smoke and ash hung heavy in the air, leaving no doubt as to where the blaze had been sparked. Lurk led them through the trunks of normal trees and those of their kind, hurrying towards the source of the flame. And there, in a small gully, was the fire. 2 oak trees ablaze on the far side, along with the branches of one of their fellows. The harsh light from the fire seemed to turn the man's face into a silent scream, his blank eyes pleading for help. And so they rushed to the nearby creek. And so they hurried to the nearby creek, filling up their buckets and then rushing back to the source of the blaze. The dry heat and choking smoke wafted over them like hateful fog as Lurk and the others worked feverishly. Bucket after bucket was hurled into the heart of the fire, while the younger children doused flaming pieces of bark which fell around them like snow. Yessie nearly set herself alight, her already dried hair going up and forcing her to dive into the river. Fela lost the mobility of her hand permanently, managing to curl her fingers into a hook shape she could use to carry a bucket handle. For the longest time, it seemed that they were making no difference, for no sooner would they douse the fire than the water would run out, and the flames would return in full force, while smaller fires sprouting up like burning weeds wherever the bark landed would distract them from the real fire. With Augier's guidance, they began to form a relay, letting them keep the water coming, while Lurk directed Yessie and Algie to keep the fire from spreading from the scattering embers. Minutes seemed like hours, every stumble a great setback. A single spilled bucket was a catastrophe which left the one holding it in tears. It was after what seemed an eternity of running to and fro, of scrapes and bruises and mud everywhere, that the fire began to abate. A lightness came over Lurk as she cast a bucket of water into the branches, and the flames seemed to be quenched permanently. Progress lasted more than moments as the tongues of flame retreated from the branches. The light faded back towards the normal star glow of the night as the last bucket was thrown, the coals sizzling under the water before fading into silence. Oh, yikes. I mean, you survived, clearly. But yeah, I really like this part. Just like it feels like tense and like there's a bit of foreshadowing. Like you can tell that the forest isn't actually going to burn down, but it is very like it's well written. I like it. It was Fela who had thrown the bucket, and she who let out a laugh of triumph before falling to the ground, panting with exhaustion. The others fell around her, Lurk and Auge laying side by side as they stared up through the branches, laughing with relief. They were all bone-weary, the air smelled of charcoal, and Yessie had lost all of her hair while Fela's hand had become still. Yet all of them laughed in relief, laying there as one, as they looked upon the faces of their relatives growing around them. No, the hair! No! Orlov, you get me! Rip hair! Water. Before long, there was a gentle song, the sweet singing of the Green Lady as she stepped into view, looking upon them all with a mixture of pride and exasperation. Yessie and Fela croaked at her appearance, only for her to quiet her singing and speak words instead, saying, "Do you wish to hear from your elders?" "Our elders?" Lurk repeated, her gaze moving to the face of the man who had been half burned. "How is that possible?" "It is a power full dryads are gifted," she said. "One usually used for children to seek comfort from parents, though you will be able to know your whole forest this way, as they remember it anyway." She brushed her hand gently over the burned man's face, whispering, "I am not proud to admit you may glean more than I from these particular trees." And then, before anyone could speak further, the Green Lady threw her arms wide, and from her lips rose the voices of others, as though a chorus had taken residence in her chest. Lurk opened her lips to speak, only to find herself rising from her body, her head swimming as the elders of the forest began to weave their tale for the youngsters who had lived so many long seasons in silence. Ooh, shining light. Excellent chapter name after the dawn, dusk, twilight. This is good. All of the children watched the earliest seeds arriving, washed ashore in the gully which marked a boundary of the woods. There were 16 in all, none older than 2 seasons, all crawling on the muddy shore, confused and frightened to their cores. For a day and a night and another long day, they shied away from the sun. They hid in whatever shelter they could, emerging in the starlight to find food and shelter and comfort. None knew who they were or where they had come from, and all ached terribly in the light. The eldest of them began to climb the cliff, the others following her lead until all of them ascended that second night to find a land barren. The sight was as shocking to their ancestors as it was to all the living cave children. There were a few isolated oak and birch trees, but most of the hillocks were covered in tufts of nasty grasses and purple-topped thistles. And here the first seeds had eked out an existence. After that initial climb, their tale devolved into a confusing string of images, for these first seeds had no language or writing or anything that young children alone could not cobble together themselves. They lived on raw acorns and mushrooms and the roots of weeds, naked and lonely, hiding every day from the hated sun in muddy holes topped by weeds they tangled together. These were the lives of their earliest ancestors, season after season of fearful ignorance, until that dreaded day arrived when the sun turned from hateful source of pain to irresistible pleasure. And so the first of them took root, the others screaming in fright as their friend departed from them. And shortly thereafter he died, his leaves withering away as his mind shut down from the pain and loneliness. One by one they changed, and one by one they perished, unable to take the strain until only 3 were left. And it was these children who formed the heart of the woods. For one girl became so barky brown that she could no longer move, and so the other girl and the last boy emerged with her, facing their fate together as they took root on a hillock, expecting to wither and die as the others had done. But this time they were not alone. This time they were able to think to one another, to prop one another up with their thoughts. Yet none of them had any words, any idea what they truly were, and so it was a thin companionship they offered one another. But for the first time, the seed children of the cave understood that, while frozen in place, their forebears still experienced the world, aware of their surroundings, able to think to one another and share all that they were. And then, 4 seasons after taking root, all 3 sprouted flowers. Too many flowers. The new seed children drained their mothers, nearly killing one and killing the other, while the boy looked on helplessly. None of them knew how to close their flowers or wait for the wind, and so 30 new seeds toppled to the ground from their branches, frightened, alone, their parents unable to offer them anything except the nourishing sap of the mother's breasts. Slowly, these children suffered the same fate as their elders, many moving too far away and perishing alone, while others starved for lack of sustenance. And without language, some of those who grew near enough to their parents to link minds perished regardless. The cycle began anew with the surviving 15 children, all of whom bore too many seeds, half of the women perishing again as their offspring were left to fend for themselves. Yet there was in this darkness a spark of hope, where 1 or 2 children worked out how to dig a better shelter and weave a proper covering. One even learned from a squirrel to hide acorns and other nuts for the long, lean winter days. From visions, they saw that this was the key to their survival, for caches of nuts would sprout into trees, eventually producing enough nuts and acorns to feed them. But this was far in the future. For generation after generation, they spread across the forest, growing alongside other trees, the fear and pain seeming to soak into the ground itself. And then one day, as the land filled with trees, one woman discovered how to close her flowers and keep herself from making any seeds. Once more the forest nearly perished, for all of them, boy and girl, closed their flowers, none wishing to condemn another generation to their pain and suffering. The number of seeds dwindled to nearly nothing. The forest grew silent as the last few stragglers dwelled in utter loneliness. 1 or 2 seeds would come every few seasons from torn petals letting out their pollen, but the forest was beginning to perish now. It was here, into this void, that Alfun the Traveler appeared. For the first time, the seed children saw him, the man who had saved and doomed them in a single stroke. He was old and gray, older than any human-like creature they had seen, his legs creaking under him. He had found the last 6 seeds huddling in a tiny hole, and mistaken them for human children. When one of their number had turned into a tree before his eyes, Alfun had hurriedly taken the remaining 5, the only seeds born in 10 seasons, to a place they recognized, a dirt cave which would one day be dug out into their home. It was here that he began his first lessons, teaching them to speak and write and read, teaching them to make fire and respect the flames. He showed them how to dig and how to make acorn bread. For the first time, there seemed to be color in the memory of the forest, for at last the children knew how to speak, to form words, to make their thoughts whole. And for the first time, they had names. Each new tree to take root was no longer one of the number, but someone with a label, a sound unique to that one. The forest grew more lively and more sullen when those 5 joined the chorus, for the trees who came before wanted names and words and more. But it was too late for them, and so the forest seemed to grow apart between old and new, as new seed children were taken in by those educated by Alfun and those who he had educated. Wait. I think that's a little off. I think the first part is just new seed children were taken in by Alfun and those he had educated when he slipped into death. Just get rid of this part. And as new seed children were taken in by Alfun and those who he had educated, when he slipped into death, as all humans must inevitably do. Oh, wait, Barb, we're 4 pages away. And so a divided forest formed. More children were born, but now they were even more afraid of their fated destiny with the sun, for Elfun had assumed it to be a curse and not a natural part of their lives. And then the Green Lady appeared at the very end, an excited murmur followed by frustration, as the trees young and old struggled to communicate with her, while she found herself overwhelmed by the disharmony in their alien thoughts. 1,000 more images and words and thoughts came to their mind. Lurk heard from her mother for the first time, the woman's words stilling her heart. Augé knew the thoughts of those 2 men reaching towards one another across the hills at last. Fela heard from Sedig, all of his complaints making her laugh out loud. Yessi heard the words of the man she had nearly burned, his forgiveness bringing her to tears, while Iben heard from his parents both. Slowly the visions and voices faded away as the children returned to the grove once more. They rose from where they had lain, looking over the trees around them with a new understanding. By then the first purpling of dawn had filled the sky, though none of them were afraid anymore. Yet none was quite so enthusiastic about turning into a tree either, with first Fela and then the others beginning to move back towards home. The Green Lady fell in behind him, keeping her distance, though never letting them out of sight. Upon arriving at the gully, the children stopped before the cave entrance, looking back to her. For a time they stood apart, regarding one another as though from a great distance. "I would have those ready come with me to find good places to take root," she said quietly. "It is the right hour for it, and 4 of you are of age." "How long would we have to exist as trees before we could walk around as you do?" Fela asked, rubbing her useless hook hand. "I am not certain," the Green Lady replied, looking forlorn. "It ordinarily takes 100 seasons until emergence is possible, but 1,000 have come and gone since those first seeds washed ashore here, and none have come forth." "Maybe they don't know how," Lurk suggested. "But how can I explain to them? Your human-like words are so clumsy, and those without them are even harder to communicate with." "Maybe we can explain it," Augé said. "They're closer to us than to you. Tell us what we need to know, and we'll carry that knowledge to them." "That may work," the Green Lady said, nodding. "Though you would have to take root." The sun was rising now, the purple shifting towards blue, and yet they lingered on. For Lurk and Augé and Wilnick and even Fela felt now delight of the coming sunlight. Old fears and new knowledge clashed, metaphorically rooting them in place. And then, without quite meaning to, Fela stepped towards the Green Lady, followed by Wilnick and then Augé and Lurk together, holding hands as they strolled together towards their destiny. They all took a final look back at their home, the others too young to understand, shying away from the still painful light. Though Warness was at the edge, she too stepped back into the shade, her face anxious as she asked, "Must you leave us?" "We're not leaving you," Fela said, rubbing her arm. "We'll be here, listening, watching, and you can speak with us if you'd like." "And you'll join us before too many days have gone," Lurk promised, "and more lost children will come to you." "You will have my guidance as well," the Green Lady said softly, "and that of the others, for I know more dryads will emerge in the seasons ahead with their help." With that they set out, walking through the woods. The Green Lady was with them, though she made certain not to touch them as they moved around the gray mountains to the creek. She explained in her own way what it felt like to emerge as a dryad. Her description involved the sensation of coming back awake after a long time dreaming, of building oneself into a flower. While the words did not quite make sense, the meaning was somehow clear. And so when they arrived at the calm willow woman, Fela stopped, whispering, "This is far enough. I want to know what she's thinking." The Green Lady nodded approvingly as Fela sat down for the last time, her legs crossed. And then she tugged off her tunic, locking eyes with the calm woman. The green woman came behind her then, clasping her hands on Fela's shoulders. She gasped, shuddering. Then a look of calm came to her as well as she took root, her arms becoming branches. Once more, Lurk Augei and Wilnick felt a tremor of unease. Yet the sun reached them then, golden beams of light cascading through the branches. A buzzing sensation filled their minds as the pleasure of the light filled them. They hurried then, stepping along the creek to the pond where Sedig had taken root. Here, Wilnick took his resting place, rooting himself beside their old friend to keep him company through the long ages. With the blazing light upon him, he hardly needed the Green Lady's help, calmly turning into a tree. It was a somewhat longer walk for Lurk and Augei, though there was no question where they were going. The two strolled hand in hand, growing more peaceful with each step. They resisted the growing urge to take root until they reached that spot, their favorite one overlooking the valley, the one they now knew their ancestors had emerged from. Augei and Lurk shared a final kiss in their current forms, then tossed aside their tunics, letting the light flood over their bodies as they... No. Okay. They resisted the growing urge to take root until they reached that spot, their favorite one overlooking the valley, the one they now knew their ancestors had emerged from. Augei and Lurk shared a final kiss in their current forms, then tossed aside their tunics, letting the light flood over their bodies as they settled down together, Lurk in Augei's lap. For a moment they held one another, glorying in the warmth and light, and then they took root together, Lurk laughing and Augei letting out a sigh as their arms moved together towards the sky, interlocking into branches, as their awareness spread from their bodies and into the lively chorus of the forest around them. The two could feel everything, look and hear and touch from the bodies of their forebears, as the thoughts and images of 1,000 lifetimes came to them as though in a waking dream. And then Lurk and Augei returned to their own bodies, feeling the sun and then the stars and moon and their closeness and all the new sensations from coming into their adult forms, with the promise of children and knowledge that the long walks they once that then long walks once they awoke once more into the world, as the dryads they truly were. The Dryad Forest. Legends tell of a forest where the trees come to life, where the children of the dryads live in caves until they are ready to take root and emerge 25 years later as full creatures. While there are many woods with human-shaped trees and flitting shapes in the twilight, only one stands out, where people have heard the songs of the dryads, seen their leafy bodies and those pale-skinned children in the night, where every human-shaped tree is carved with a name. It is said that forest came awake only when two lovers took the knowledge into the roots and branches which had heretofore lay dormant. No one knows where they came from, except that there is an overlook on the valley which divides the forest, where at dawn, two lovers can be seen with their family, welcoming the sunlight in one another's arms. Hey, that was good. The song started just a little bit too early, but whatever. Yeah. Well, one thing I will say is it reminded me a lot of the later Ender's Game books. Because there's like a major plot point of this like species of monkeys who are like sentient and also turn into trees that become trees that talk to each other. It's interesting. Yeah, Sleep is Safe. Book over. Yeah. I mean, it's very different in tone and everything from that, so I don't think it's like plagiarism or anything. It's just like an interesting like similarity. And yeah. Thanks everyone for watching. I'm gonna go download Zelda now. See ya. Wait. Can I raid into anyone? That's probably a pertinent question. Looks like Blobber's playing Zelda. Let's raid into Blobber playing Zelda. And someone go back and clip the part of me laughing at... Wait, what was it? Come on. Come on, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I'm bait for your hole. So someone go back and clip that. I'm bait for your hole.